It was one of those gray afternoons when the sky seemed too heavy to hold itself together. The rain fell not in drops but in whispers, soft, steady threads that blurred the edges of everything. The small town of Clearwater seemed half asleep under the storm, its streets glistening like rivers of glass. The scent of wet earth mixed with the faint smoke from chimneys, and thunder rumbled far away, slow and tired, like a heart that had forgotten how to rest. 8-year-old Emily Carter ran through the puddles, her little boots splashing with each hurried step. Her umbrella had broken that morning, and now the rain ran freely down her hair and coat. She wasn't afraid of storms. Her father had taught her to love the sound of rain. He used to say it was the sky's way of reminding us that everything, even clouds, has to cry sometimes. But since he'd been gone, the rain felt different. It no longer comforted, it echoed. As she crossed the street near the old bookstore, a sound reached her. Faint, trembling, almost swallowed by the rain. She stopped, turning her head. For a moment she thought it was the wind. Then it came again, a soft whimper. Emily followed the sound to a narrow alley behind the shop. The air was colder there, trapped between brick walls, and smelled of wet cardboard and rust. She took a few careful steps forward, her eyes searching through the dim light. Then she saw it. A small dog, soaked and trembling, crouched behind a pile of boxes. Its fur was matted with mud, ribs showing through thin skin, and one of its legs hung limp. It didn't bark or growl, it just looked at her, those amber eyes glimmering through the rain. Eyes that seemed to plead without sound. "Hey," Emily whispered, kneeling down. "It's okay. I won't hurt you." The little dog flinched but didn't move away. Emily hesitated only a second before slipping off her rain jacket and wrapping it gently around him. His body was ice cold, his breathing shallow. When she lifted him, she felt him tremble, not from fear but from weakness. That's when she noticed something glinting through the mud around his neck, a thin silver chain tangled deep in his fur. A small heart-shaped locket hung from it. She didn't think much of it then. She was too busy running home, the dog pressed close to her chest, her hair plastered to her face by the rain. When she burst through the door, her mother, Sarah, nearly dropped her mug. "Emily, what on earth?" "He was all alone, Mom. He's hurt. Please, can we help him?" Sarah's first instinct was to say no. They barely had enough to take care of themselves. But one look at Emily's pleading eyes and the pitiful little creature shivering in her arms changed her mind. "All right," she sighed. "We'll take him to the vet first thing tomorrow. For now, let's get him warm." The cottage smelled of wood smoke and old books. Sarah fetched towels and together they dried the dog as best they could. He didn't resist, didn't bark. Just watched them quietly, his amber eyes always following Emily's movements. When she spoke, his ears twitched softly as if the sound of her voice meant something to him. Later that night, after Sarah went to bed, Emily sat by the fire, the dog curled beside her feet. The rain tapped lightly on the window pane, a slow rhythm that matched her heartbeat. She brushed the last bits of dirt from his fur and saw the chain again. Carefully, she untangled it, wiping away the grime until the silver locket caught the light. It was old, scratched, and slightly dented. She opened it, and froze. Inside was a faded photograph. A man in uniform, smiling beneath a clear sky. Her father. Captain Daniel Carter. Emily's throat tightened. Her father had died 2 years ago in a car accident, on his way home from a rescue mission during a storm much like this one. The necklace he wore that night, the same heart-shaped locket he'd given Sarah when Emily was born, had been buried with him. Her hands trembled as she whispered, How do you have this?" The dog just stared at her, eyes steady, silent, almost knowing. The next morning Sarah and Emily took him to the vet. Dr. Miller, an old friend of the family, examined the wound on his leg and frowned at the chain. "Strange," he muttered. "This wasn't torn off. It was cut, cleanly." Sarah frowned. "Cut? You mean someone did this on purpose?" "Maybe," the vet said. "Or maybe someone wanted it to be found." That night, after Emily went to bed, Sarah pulled out an old wooden box from the closet, Daniel's things. His rescue badges, his journals, the photo of him surrounded by search dogs and volunteers. She sat by the fire, her fingers tracing his handwriting on the back of a picture. "For Sarah and Emily, my reason to come home." When she looked up, Emily was standing in the doorway wrapped in her blanket. "Mom," she said softly, "maybe Daddy sent him." Sarah forced a small smile. "Maybe he did, sweetheart." Days passed. The little dog, now named Scout, began to recover. His limp grew lighter, his eyes brighter. He followed Emily everywhere, to school, to the garden, waiting at the gate every afternoon for her to come home. And though Sarah still couldn't explain the locket, she couldn't ignore how the house felt different since his arrival. Less empty. More alive. But Scout had his strange moments. At night, when the wind shifted from the north, he'd stand at the window, his ears perked, eyes fixed on the woods behind the house. Sometimes he'd whine softly, low and mournful, as if hearing a call that only he could understand. One afternoon, when the storm finally broke and sunlight returned, Emily was playing in the yard when Scout suddenly stopped, lifted his head and bolted toward the woods. "Scout. Wait," she shouted, running after him. He darted through the field, paws splashing through puddles, until he reached the narrow forest trail. The trees stood tall and dark, their wet trunks gleaming. Emily followed, panting, branches scratching her arms. The smell of pine and wet soil filled the air. Then ahead Scout stopped. He stood at the edge of an old bridge, half collapsed, swallowed by moss and fog. He sniffed the ground, barked once, and began to dig furiously. Emily knelt beside him, her fingers brushing cold mud. Something hard met her touch. Metal? She wiped it clean. A rusted tag, small and worn, engraved with 2 letters, DC. Her father's initials. She froze. The forest seemed to go silent around her. "Dad?" she whispered. When she showed the tag to her mother, Sarah turned pale. "That bridge," she said, voice trembling, "that's where they searched for your father. The car was swept away by the river. They never found anything. That night sleep didn't come. The rain returned, soft, steady, unending. Around midnight, Sarah got out of bed and found Emily awake, sitting by the window with Scout curled beside her. Neither spoke. They just listened to the rain. Finally Sarah said, "Let's go." They drove through the storm, headlights cutting through the mist, until the bridge appeared again, ghostly under the downpour. When they stepped out, Scout ran ahead, barking tail high. He stopped at the same spot and began digging once more. Sarah knelt beside him, her hands sinking into the wet earth. Something solid scraped her fingertips, a stone covering something beneath. Together they lifted it. Underneath was a small waterproof pouch, old but sealed. Sarah's breath caught as she opened it. Inside was a folded letter, wrapped in faded cloth. She unrolled it carefully, her hands shaking. The handwriting was Daniel's. "If you ever find this, it means I didn't make it back. I'm sorry for the moments I'll miss. But I want you both to live with kindness, even when the world forgets it. My necklace belongs to Emily now. And if she ever feels lost, I hope something will guide her home. Maybe even an old friend." At the bottom was a faint, smudged paw print. Sarah pressed the paper to her chest, tears falling silently. Emily hugged Scout tightly, burying her face in his fur. "You found us," she whispered. "You brought him back." Scout licked her cheek, tail wagging weakly, eyes soft and glowing in the rainlight. Weeks later, word spread across Clearwater. People came to hear about the little girl, the stray dog, and the letter that crossed from life to memory. But Emily and her mother didn't care for stories. They cared only for the peace that had returned to their small home, and for the quiet guardian who had brought it. Scout became part of the family. Every night, he slept at the foot of Emily's bed, and sometimes when rain fell again he'd sit by the window watching the woods. His ears would twitch, but he no longer looked sad. Only calm, like someone who had finished a long journey. One morning, Emily woke to sunlight spilling through the curtains. On her nightstand, the heart-shaped locket gleamed softly. Inside, her father's picture seemed brighter than ever. Next to it lay a single white fur, smooth and delicate. Emily smiled through tears. She held the locket close to her chest. "Thank you," she whispered, "for bringing him home." Outside, the world shimmered with light. The trees whispered, the river murmured, and the air smelled like new beginnings. For the first time in a long while, the rain did not echo sadness. It carried something else. Love. Because Emily finally understood what her father meant. Love never dies. It only changes shape, until it finds its way home again.